I've only had this game downloaded for a month and it's already absorbed my life. Yeah, I know. I have 3 other Final Fantasies I could be reviewing first, but screw that. Now, I tried for a while to resist the temptation to play 14 once I got a gaming PC because I had a sneaking suspicion that I would immediately become absorbed into this game, considering the fact that I've gotten hooked on games with MMO elements in the past, like Destiny and The Division. That and the fact that this is a Final Fantasy game, a series I've been getting into and enjoying thus far, so getting into a Final Fantasy MMO looked like a death sentence to my spare time. I was right, Final Fantasy XIV is my life now. So long, Bravely! I really thought that was just a joke, I hope. So considering the fact that I've beaten the base game in patch content and have put in 120 plus hours within my first month of starting, with more from Heavensward, I figured I'd give my first impressions on A Realm Reborn today. Right quick, if you're new to the channel though, a like and a sub would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Hey, did you know that FF14, the critically acclaimed MMORPG, has a free trial to level 60, which includes the award-winning expansion Heavensward? I did, not sponsored. None of this is. Oh, I wish. Oh, and I guess I'll try to avoid spoilers as best I can. Okay. So the first thing I had to do was make a new Gmail account so I could claim the free trial, since I'd already gone and made Square Enix accounts previously with my other emails, and they were past the point of being able to be used for the trial. Kind of annoying, but it's whatever. Especially considering how awesome the trial is. And there's no time limit on it either, so at this rate I'll absolutely be at least 200 hours in before I even get to Stormblood, because I've already come to terms with myself that I'm going to be paying for this game in the very near future. So first came character creation. When asking my friends what people tend to play as, I received the answers edgy dragon people and cat girls, so that leaves only one reasonable option left. The living embodiment of my inevitable future VTuber persona. Imagine wanting to be different than everyone else, so you go with the blandest fantasy race in existence. Human. Couldn't be me. Gave my precious boy red hair, red eyes, goes with my name. The Sen part of my name comes from all my friends and morbs that played using the same last name. Just one big, happy, half-inactive family. Then it was time to choose a job. Deep down, I had to resist the urge to get into tanks or edgy, dual-wielding swordsmen. I wasn't going to jump in and become a samurai weeb in 5 minutes. I refused. Dark Knight. Eventually. I wanted to try something different from what I usually like to play in RPGs, so I went with Thaumaturge. We're going for Black Mage, baby. So yeah, you don't start off with the classic Final Fantasy classes. Instead, you have this unique set of jobs that can become the OGs later on. So long as you remember to equip your job crystal, lest you end up being the level 80 Lancer that everyone's glaring at. Classes are broken down into DPS, healer, and tank roles, if that wasn't already obvious for an MMO. One thing I really liked was that you can swap into any class you want at any time, just as long as you complete a certain amount of guild quests for your first class beforehand, and then go pick up the new jobs after. It gives a lot of freedom in the future to just play whatever you feel like, or to change from a job if it turns out to not be what you want. And just throwing it in there, the gameplay in general feels pretty good. You run around, target enemy, hit button. When cooldown ends, hit another button. Hitting big damage buttons gives me neuron activation. That is my review of the gameplay. The Black Mage rotation is... oh, it's nice. Me likey. Playing Black Mage can be broken down as follows. If mana bar is full, cast Wacky Smacky Fire Attacky to do big boy damage. If mana bar is getting low, cast Blizzard to enter mana regeneration mode, where you do less damage than with fire, but your mana comes back a hell of a lot faster. And sometimes you throw in a Thunder spell to deal damage over time, because saying dot damage is stupid and repetitive. Welcome to the Clan of Redundancy Clan. I picked up on the Black Mage, Thaumaturge rotation quickly and just went with it, all the way to level 60. Which is to say, I hit the Heavensward cap on my Black Mage before I really started Heavensward. But in playing such a high IQ class, I learned 2 terrible things. The eternal torment that is DPS Q times, and the fact that I will never be relied upon for doing boss mechanics. But we'll save that story for later. For now, let's jump into a different story. So, one thing that stood out immediately when I started playing is that this is a Final Fantasy first and MMO second. This both works and doesn't work at the same time, but in the end it leans more on the better side. I'll try to avoid talking about any direct spoilers again, but let's just establish the plot first. I'll give you a general idea of what's going on. So the first really cool thing about A Realm Reborn is that it takes place after the events of the first Final Fantasy XIV. You know, the one that failed. Yeah, they ended their game by almost destroying the land of Eorzea. Nutty, I know. Anyway, the Red Moon Dalamud was opened up by the Bad Empire people, the Garleans, and Bahamut came out and was all like, "Wow, I'm a pissed off dragon, time to fuck up the land." And they fucked up the land. And then this absolute Chad named Louis Sois sacrificed himself to stop Bahamut. Now we jump into A Realm Reborn, and you're in the shoes of an adventurer new to the land of Eorzea. You do some stuff, black out a few times, and eventually you get recruited into an order called the Scions of the Seventh Dawn. Their job, and therefore now yours, is to stop various beast tribes from summoning their primal gods, these being Ifrit, Titan, Ramu, Shiva, and all the other classic recurring elementals from the Final Fantasy series. And alongside that, you gotta deal with the imposing threat of the Garlean Empire, and there's also these Organization 13 clones called the Ascians, whose goal isn't really clear at the moment. I don't know, they just kind of watch you from afar and make life harder for you in general, and then when you do get in a fight with them, you just kick their ass in 0.3 seconds. The Scion's leader, Minfilia, also informs you of how the two of you have this power called the Echo, granted to you by Mother Hydaelyn, who as far as I can tell is just a giant crystal. And this power lets you view memories from other people, which is what caused your blackouts, and prevents you from being enthralled by primals. I thought the story was overall pretty damn good. It was enjoyable running around taking down these classic Final Fantasy enemies in this fresh new formula. Not really sure how gathering the crystals helped in the end, but crystals, I guess. One thing I really appreciated is that the game actually acknowledges the fact that your character has saved the world on multiple occasions, that you become a reputable figure among Eorzean society, whereas other games would just tend to shrug it off as, "Oh, the god was defeated, who was it? I don't know." Even though the big activities aren't just completed by you alone, it's a nice touch that really gets the player involved with the story. The political portions were also pretty well done. Exposition dumps about the power dynamics of Ul'dah actually kind of kept my attention because I was invested in what was going on. The final missions were alright. I enjoyed the Praetorium, and Ultima is now one of my favorite boss themes ever because it's such a good song. Oh yeah, and there's lots of patch content to do for A Realm Reborn. The final ending, though, at the end of the patch content, oh boy, what a way to end your base game. Just setting up the pieces for Heavensward perfectly. Lots of cliffhangers and unfinished plot points to explain later in the game. And just one crazy thing happening after another. So good. I will spare you spoilers because one does not simply spoil the ending of 2.55. Just go play it for yourself. I promise you will not be disappointed. Just make sure you put aside the time beforehand to do the quest, The Parting Glass. The word several in several cutscenes is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. It's basically a full-length movie, but it's so worth it. Only complaints I have were that the inevitable filler quests were sometimes really bullshit and overly long, like the lead up to Titan, and that the overall globe-trotting nature of the plot makes it a little looser compared to other stories. Alright, let's get back to talking about the game. So Eorzea is big. Not really a lot of notes for this section, so I'll just go through it quickly. There are a handful of different zones for you to explore, and sometimes it's just fun to run around and fight some mobs or do some fates, the game's equivalent of public events. They range from wave combat to boss fights to escort missions. Don't do escort missions. These suck. My favorite one is this event in Northern Thanalan called Dark Devices. It's a multi-part event and it's super cool. Go check it out. Ul'dah is the Desert Kingdom, if one can call it that, and was my starting town. There's sellswords and miners and traders alike, and a lot of political turmoil between the big merchants and the currently ruling royalty. Sneaky shit going on in positions of power, lots of corruption for you to root out, and I'm aware the area is called Thanalan and Ul'dah is just the city, but I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. No one gives a fuck. Limsa Lominsa is the watery coastal zone. There's pirates and sailors and lots of islands. Lots and lots of fucking islands. The city itself looks cool, and I want to take a real vacation to Costa del Sol, but I found this place to be the most annoying to navigate at the start when trying to align my aetherites because of all the boating paths and crap, but It's whatever. And then there's Gridania. Ah, Gridania. Ul'dah may be my birthplace, but my heart is in Gridania. This is the forest region, and I just love it here. Of all the places to run around in, the Black Shroud is easily my favorite. It's just really nice and peaceful, and really captures the feeling of a fantasy adventure. Also, Connie Senna is awesome. She's such a good leader. She gave the best speech out of the 3 leaders. That's why I joined Slytherin House anyways. And it's not a mess to navigate. The Aetherites are well placed, so I'd live here if I had to pick a place. There's also Mordona, which is like a crystal landscape. It's alright, got some cool landmarks like a giant tower and a dragon wrapped around the wreckage of a giant ship. And Karthus, also just known to me as Pre-Ishgard. You dance around up there in the snow a little bit before you actually do anything involved with Heavensward, but it's alright. Lack of Aetherites in some spots is kind of annoying. Fuck you, White Brim Front, and your Aetherite lacking ass. Camp Dragonhead is my home now, and Horschiffant is my friend. The environments are cool. That's all I've got. So I won't be covering PvP in this review because I didn't do it, and also because no one plays an MMO specifically for the PvP. Except maybe The Division. Try and convince me that game isn't an MMO. I can wait. Maybe I'll talk about PvP whenever I review Heavensward. We'll see. In the meantime, let's talk about the content that still involves other players, but doesn't involve us beating each other to death. First, the lower tier mandatory content, Trials and Dungeons. Trials and Dungeons are your smaller activities, having only 4 to 8 players depending on the specific instance, but if anyone badmouths them, you have my authority to shut them the f***. Trials are just boss fights. That's it. You spawn in and you face off against a primal, usually, or some other threat. Trials are pretty awesome, they tend to have some badass music, and the mechanics are pretty cool. They also go by quickly, so if you're grinding them for mounts, it won't take super long per attempt. My personal favorite is the Shiva trial because holy shit is it good. Cool mechanics, good boss design, and then the music swap halfway through. I'm like, Dustin. Whoa! Yeah, it's pretty good. And both of her themes are incredible. I love Footsteps in the Snow, which is why I'm dying to do that one Shadowbringers raid. Dungeons are more along the lines of what you're probably imagining upon hearing me say dungeons. Different locations with multiple rooms, groups of enemies to fight, objectives to clear, and a boss at the end. I wish I could say that my first dungeon experience went well, but then I'd be lying and I can't do that to you guys. So, impromptu story time. On my first ever run of Sestasha, I was running DPS as a thaumaturge, obviously, and my friend Sham was the other DPS as a dancer. We found ourselves a healer, and then finally, a tank. That tank's name shall forever be a blight upon my memory, and the entire ordeal can be summed up in those 2 God-forsaken words. Beth Wells. Beth Wells was our tank, yes, but they didn't know how to use their tank stance, which is what draws all the enemy aggro and keeps the rest of the team safe. You know, kind of the tanks thing. We pleaded with Beth Wells, begged them over and over again in the party chat to turn on their tank stance. Unfortunately, the tank's brain cells were deteriorating faster than we could plead. After every encounter that involved loot, the Sprout tank would just stand there, doing nothing apparently, before finally moving so that we could continue the dungeon. And then, only a few rooms away from the final boss, they disconnected. And they didn't return. So we had to completely restart the dungeon from scratch, with the long queue times. And that is the legend of Beth Wells. But I should probably mention that this kind of thing doesn't happen all the time. It happens, yes, but usually you get your activity done on the first, sometimes second try. I just thought it would be an interesting story. My favorite dungeons were probably Hawk Manor, the Praetorium, and Tamtara Deepcroft. Fuck Thazamaz though. Hate that dungeon. There's also another kind of dungeon called a Deep Dungeon, and the one in the Realm Reborn is called the Palace of the Dead. It's a roguelike instance where you're set to level 1 and have to wander through the floor to find the teleporter to the next floor, and you have up to 4 other players in there. You can use it to level grind pretty well outside of doing your daily roulettes, which is nice. I didn't do it much though, but I thought it was neat. Moving on from that, we enter the endgame content, raids and alliance raids. There is a difference between them, so I will go over that. Raids are closer to trials in regards to how they play more than anything else. Like trials, they have 8 players, but interestingly, they're broken up into turns. Each raid has about 4 to 5 turns, and each turn has a small handful of encounters with a boss at the end typically, but they're way shorter than dungeons. The 3 raids for A Realm Reborn are all part of the same narrative, the Binding Coil of Bahamut, followed by the Second Coil and the Final Coil. These raids tie up some loose ends left regarding what happened during that Calamity cutscene that happened at the start of the game, and the truth behind what happened with Louisoix. All 3 of the raids were pretty cool, especially because their main theme uses the motif of Answers, the song that plays during the previously mentioned cutscene. And I'm a big sucker for motifs in game soundtracks, so I was absolutely loving it. Hell, the boss fight against Bahamut in the Final Coil just uses Answers as its theme. Super interesting and fitting and just plain awesome. Granted, doing the raid itself wasn't that difficult considering I had my ass carried by 2 level 80 players through an unsynced instance, but I still had a lot of fun doing it. And I can't wait until I can craft myself the Black Mage robes from the Final Coil to use as transmog, because goddamn do they look good! I just refuse to plummet back into that rabbit hole again. Which leads me to a quick mini rant. If you are planning to try the free trial up to level 60, which includes the critically acclaimed expansion Heavensward, do not get involved with crafting jobs. Holy fuck, I wasted so much time trying to do this on my own. All I wanted to do was craft some Orchestrion scrolls so I could make some more space in my inventory, and 2 weeks later, I still hadn't gotten them. There are so many fucking hoops to jump through, and not having access to trading or the player market board makes it way too difficult to actually make the things you want, because all the classes are intertwined. So if you want to level up Alchemist, you also have to grind your Botanist and your Miner so you can collect the proper materials to craft with, and it's just a tedious headache trying to make everything on your own. Do not recommend, do not try it until you have the market board available. Rant over. The other kind of raid is an alliance raid. This is more along the lines of what comes to mind for me when I hear the word raid. It's a 24-man instance where you're split into 3 groups of 8 to go through a long series of encounters and boss fights. These 3 raids also have their own story, all involving the Crystal Tower in Mordona, Labyrinth of the Ancients, Circus Tower, and World of Darkness. The great thing about these raids is that they are part of your daily roulettes, which are basically match-made instances for various parts of the game that offer extra experience and stuff for helping out in them, just dailies. Now, you might think that matchmaking 24 people for a raid would turn into an unmitigated disaster. And you'd be right, but again, only on the rare occasion, aka 50% of the time you fight Angra Manu in World of Darkness. But in all honesty, they tend to go pretty well, and you can just learn the mechanics as you go, because there's almost always someone there that's done it before, and you can learn from them. A great example of this happened after a raid wipe on the final boss of Labyrinth, and so on the next attempt, whenever the raid wipe attack was occurring, this highly detailed and thorough description of events popped up in everyone's chat. Attention, important game mechanics are happening right now. Gotta love it. One thing I realized early on when doing alliance raids is that I am one of the best black mages in NA. Not because of my insane fat fingering of important keys at pivotal moments, but because I'm the only black mage in NA who does raid mechanics. Yes, I know it's heresy to my kind, but is it really that bad when I can't cast ley lines to stand in the first place? And is it really that hard to stand in a meteor and use Mana Ward? They'll never understand. Labyrinth was fine, and World of Darkness grew on me with time. But Circus Tower? I can do it for days. The main theme is an absolute banger. I wonder where I've heard it before. Oh yeah, that one song from this game that everyone knows, even if they haven't played it before. And it's got lots of cool encounters and a neat environment. So yeah, Circus Tower, best alliance raid. We can't end this review without talking about the design and music of this game. Visually speaking, the game looks good. I like the designs of all the characters and monsters and primals, they all look great. As said previously too, the locations are all really cool too. My favorite place again is Gridania. Just wandering through the great woods of the Black Shroud is really relaxing when you're not busy fighting stuff. The armor and weapons are really awesome, and I'm happy that there's an option to hide hats or helmets, or to raise and lower visors. It's really nice that I can just look at my character if the headgear is goofy as fuck. And the transmog is nice too. Mounts are exciting to collect and ride, just the game looks good in general. Kinda touched on this section here and there already, don't got a lot more to say, I'm repeating myself, so that's it with the visuals. Now as for music, yeah, that's about accurate. FF14's main composer is one Masayoshi Soken, an absolute chad of a man who also plays the automaton apparently. Anyway, the soundtrack is absolutely banging. From the calming city themes and open world tunes to the slappin' boss themes, this soundtrack's got it all. Soken put a lot of effort and heart into the music, and it really shows. Hell, almost every time I pass by a Fate while doing my own thing, the music just makes me want to turn around and do the Fate anyways. Jumping from more classical style pieces to rock and roll, or a mix of the two, you just gotta love it. The game even has a heavy metal band for it called the Primals. It's pretty sweet. Soundtrack good. Good music. Alright, I think that's enough for today. I haven't even touched on some other aspects of the game, like PvP and crafting and gathering jobs, as I mentioned, but there's also stuff like owning your own house, different manners of quests, guild heists, the gold saucer, weddings. There's just so much to do and too much to talk about. So do I recommend? I mean, of course I'm going to recommend it. The only things I disliked about this game were the filler quest sections that went on for too long, and one other point that I haven't gotten to address yet. As a free trial, there's a large lack of access to a number of social interaction features, like the market board or forming parties. I get that it's to deal with bots, scams, and spam, which I can suffer through for that, but it does get rather annoying when you eventually reach that point where you almost need those services to get things done. Granted, even without words, you can just feel how nice the community is in general. But that's all. Everything else has been absolutely wonderful thus far, and it's just been getting better. This game has sucked me in, and I absolutely adore it. If you've been wanting to try Final Fantasy XIV, absolutely do so, it's worth it. Just know that the purchasing method is kind of fucky. Give the trial a go, you've got nothing to lose, and everything to gain. I've also been streaming my playthrough of the game here and there, right here on YouTube, so don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out. Otherwise, Realm Reborn is good. Play it, and I'll keep playing too. There's another whole expansion for me to review before I have to start paying. So until then, I cast Fire 4. And if you see a black mage hopping onto a meteor mechanic, feel free to say hi. I'll see you next time in Heavensward.